Hello, Ladybugs and other Serendipity students. Miss Carla here. Today I am going to be teaching you about an artist named Georgia O'Keeffe. First, I'm going to give you some information about her. I'll read a little book that I have about her. And then I'm going to go over an art project that I want you to do in the style of Georgia O'Keeffe. Here is my book. It's a series called Getting to Know the World's Greatest Artists, and it's written and illustrated by Mike Venezia. This one is on Georgia O'Keeffe. Here is a photograph of her taken in 1918. That is 100 years ago this picture was taken of her. There she is. Georgia O'Keeffe was born on her family's large Wisconsin farm in 1887. She would grow up to become one of America's most famous painters. Her clear, bright paintings show the beauty she found in the simple, natural things around her. Georgia loved to paint flowers, mountains, seashells, and even animal bones she found in the desert. This one here is a painting of a petunia. I love the colors. And this is a cattle skull. I want you to see the whole thing there. Just beautiful. Even though Georgia was interested in all kinds of natural things, she hardly ever painted pictures of people or animals. I always show this painting when I talk about Georgia O'Keeffe to my students, and I ask them, what do you think this is? And a lot of times my students will say, rocks or marshmallows. But you know what it is? It's clouds. This is a painting of the sky above the clouds. Georgia often rearranged the natural things she saw and simplified them. She made the seashell above look very large to give it a special power and strength. Sometimes she painted shapes and colors that she saw in her mind. Do you ever do that? You close your eyes and you can kind of see flashes of light or moving shapes. That's a painting of something like that she saw in her mind. The farm where Georgia grew up was a great place to learn about nature. Georgia wanted to touch and feel everything she could get her hands on. Georgia remembered that when she was very little, she put dirt in her mouth to see what it tasted like. And this is a cartoon that the author has drawn to go with it. You can see there's a little drawing of Georgia. She's saying, gee, I wonder if this dirt stuff is any good. And the worms are going, it's great. We love it. Look at the worms down there. They're very funny. And then the bear over here says, I prefer honey. And the bunny says, lettuce and carrots are pretty good too. And the cow goes, if you like dirt, you'll love grass. Georgia's mother thought art was very important and made sure Georgia and her sisters had art lessons while they were growing up. Georgia did so well with her lessons that her parents encouraged her to go to art college after she graduated from high school. Georgia studied at different art schools and colleges all over the country. At one school in New York City, she won a prize for her painting of a rabbit and a copper pot. Georgia liked New York City. It was busier and more exciting than the peaceful farm areas where she had grown up. Georgia often visited a small gallery in New York that showed off the work of new artists. It was owned by a well-known photographer named Alfred Stieglitz. And then here's another little comic here that the author has drawn. There's one person saying, remember, these are not just blobs of color and scratchy lines. These are great blobs of color and scratchy lines. And this person looking at it says, I'll have to think about this for a while. Alfred loved modern art and tried to get people interested in modern European artists like Paul Cézanne and Henri Matisse, and American artists like John Marin and Marsden Hartley. Georgia didn't know it at the time, but in a few years, Alfred would help get people interested in her paintings too. So here are some of the paintings by the artists that I just mentioned, pieces of art. After finishing school, Georgia decided to teach art for a while and traveled to Texas to take a job there. She found it an exciting place to be. Georgia loved the clear skies and the hot, bright sun. She felt the energy and power of the dust storms and heat lightning she saw at night. And here's a little cartoon. She's out in the desert watching dust storms, and she's painting, and she's going, now this is what I call beautiful. And this little snake goes, she must be from out of town. And the cow goes, yep. Georgia started to show the excitement she felt about Texas in her paintings. Soon her work looked different from the work of any other artist. During this time, Alfred Stieglitz became very interested in Georgia. And this, the first time I looked at this, I wasn't quite sure what this was a painting of. When I've asked students to look at it, they think maybe it's the hot sun. Some students say it's a snake or a snail. But the title of this painting is Evening Star, number 5. Get all the red around it. Okay. He remembered her from her visits to his gallery and had seen some of her newest works of art. Alfred thought Georgia could become one of the best American artists ever. Alfred wrote a letter to Georgia and asked her to come back to New York. He told her he could raise enough money so she wouldn't have to work and could spend all her time painting. He also offered to show her artwork in his gallery. Georgia found it hard to leave the beauty of Texas, but decided Alfred's offer was too good to miss out on. After she arrived in New York, Georgia began painting bold shapes and designs, covering her canvases with bright color. Soon her work changed and she began painting the beautiful flowers that helped to make her famous. And this painting is called Red Canna. I think that's a kind of a lily. There we go. Georgia usually made her flowers very large. She hoped they would make people feel the same wonderful way she felt when she looked at real flowers. Georgia thought her large flowers might even get busy New Yorkers to stop and notice them. And this one is called Morning Glory with Black. It's a big, beautiful close-up of a flower. And remember, when you look at these are really big. I mean, these paintings are like really big. Georgia's paintings got attention right away. At first, people were curious to see the work of a woman artist. In the 1920s, there weren't very many well-known women artists. It didn't take long for people to realize that Georgia O'Keeffe wasn't just a woman artist, she was a great American artist. Even though Georgia needed money to live, she felt funny about selling her art. Georgia worked hard on her paintings and felt so close to them that she hated to see them leave the gallery. They were almost like her children. And there's a little cartoon here that the author drew. It's of Georgia, and she's selling one of her paintings in a gallery, and she's saying, now be a good painting, behave yourself, don't forget to write, and remember, Mommy loves you. It's very silly. In between painting and showing her work, Georgia agreed to model for Alfred Stieglitz. Alfred thought Georgia was very beautiful and took many famous photographs of her. Here's a picture of her in 1918. I agree. I think she's very beautiful. That's a great picture. Alfred and Georgia had respected each other's talent for a long time. Now that Georgia was living in New York and working closely with Alfred, they found themselves falling in love. In 1924, they decided to get married. And here's a painting she did in New York of the East River. It's very different from most of the other paintings that she's famous for. They moved into an apartment high up in a big hotel. Georgia loved the wide open view she saw and started painting pictures of the city. This surprised people because in the 1920s, powerful city scenes were usually done only by men. And here's a painting called New York Night. It's really dark though, and because of the light in here in my kitchen, you can't really see it too well. But you can kind of get the gist of it. Several years later, Georgia was invited out west to visit some friends in New Mexico. She thought the desert and clear blue skies were even more exciting than the scenery in Texas. Georgia began painting the animal bones, desert flowers, and sun-baked adobe churches she found there. This painting is called Gray Hills. Georgia especially loved the mountains in New Mexico. They seemed almost alive to her. In some paintings, you might get the feeling that Georgia's mountains could get up and move around. There's a silly cartoon here where one mountain is saying, "Here comes that artist person again." And the other one goes, "Oh no, I haven't even had a chance to put on my makeup." Georgia spent most of the rest of her life painting in New Mexico. Alfred agreed it was the best place for her to be in order to make her paintings as good as possible. This painting is called Ranchos Church. Georgia only traveled back to New York for a few months every year to be with Alfred and show her work. Years later, after Alfred died, Georgia moved to New Mexico for good. This painting is called From the Plains 1. What do you think it looks like? I think it looks like fire almost, don't you? Maybe a sunset or a really spectacular sunrise. Georgia O'Keeffe lived to be 98 years old. She decided to become an artist at a time when it was proper only for women to teach art. Georgia didn't care what people thought about her or her art. She worked hard on her paintings and put her own special feeling into them. And here's a photo of her in 1948 next to a cattle skull. I love that. Georgia met many famous artists during her life. She learned a lot from them, but never copied their styles or joined their groups. Because of this, Georgia O'Keeffe's paintings are very original. She often found beauty in things that most people would ignore or never even notice, and was able to show that beauty in her paintings. And here is a painting of some bones with the sky in the distance. I love this one of this leaf. What time of year do you think that is? Fall or winter? The leaf looks cracked and dark. If you get a chance to see a real Georgia O'Keeffe painting, you'll probably notice how bright and clear the colors are. This is because Georgia paid special attention to her painting materials. She always bought the best brushes and paint, no matter how much they cost her. The paintings in this book come from the museums listed below, and then there is a listing of all the different museums where you could see Georgia O'Keeffe's paintings. There are none here in California listed in this book. That might have changed now, but every now and then an exhibit of her paintings will come around, a special exhibit, and you can go to the museum and see Georgia O'Keeffe paintings, and I promise you won't be disappointed. They're really, really beautiful. So now for today's art project, what you need is some white paper, maybe a pencil or a dark marker, some crayons or some pastels, or some paint. You can use anything you like to make this project. Some scissors. Go out into your yard or your front yard or your backyard and pick some flowers. Okay, bring them back inside. I have a little bush outside and I've got these flowers. Can you see them? I picked them because the color is really vivid, very purple, and then they've got some yellow inside, okay? You can get a good look at them. When I picked them, I came back inside my house and I really looked at them. I really studied them. I wanted to see exactly, now I'm knocking them all out of my little vase, see exactly how they looked before I started to draw them. And I really took my time. I wanted to draw just one flower. And that's what I want you to do. I want you to draw just one flower, but I want you to pick the flower and I want you to try to draw that flower. I want you to look at it really carefully. When I looked at mine, I noticed that the petals were all connected. They weren't separate, and that it was yellow in the middle, and it had some little points, and it had some curviness to it. And I drew it. But I don't want you to draw your flower like this, just a little teeny flower on a piece of paper. I want you to fill up your whole piece of paper. So first, after I studied the flower, I took a piece of paper that I had cut to be square. And then I drew the flower, and I wanted to take up as much of the surface of the paper as I could. So here you can see I did that. And then I colored it. I looked at the color of the flower, and I made my own flower. And here it is right here. And you can see I used pastels to do this, but you, like I said, you can paint it, you can use crayons, you could do whatever you like. I colored in the flower, and I really took my time. It probably took me close to an hour to draw these few flowers that I drew for you here today. And I even shaded in the parts of the paper where the flower is not taking up space, or the leaves, okay? And I really filled everything in. I wanted to use every single bit of paper. I didn't want to make a little teeny flower about this big on this paper, and I didn't want to make a bunch of little flowers. I wanted to make one great big flower. So do you think that you can do this, ladybugs? I would love to see it when we have our Friday Zoom meeting. Okay, so that's one of the things that Miss Patrice and I are going to want you to bring along to your Friday Zoom meeting is number one, the Roy Lichtenstein painting that Miss Patrice did with you on Tuesday, and number two, the big Georgia O'Keeffe flower that you will do today, Wednesday. Okay? So enjoy going out, picking your flower, and making your art. I can't wait to see what you do. Have a wonderful day, ladybugs. I miss you a lot. Mwah. Bye-bye.